Well, it is time for another video on a list video, and this is one that is a little bit different than a book list per se. These books are really kind of jumping off points more for me describing this to you than as a list of specific books. What I wanted to cover tonight was forbidden research, because there's certain topics that are just taboo. And one of the things I wanted to see tonight is what disclaimer gets put at the bottom of this video, because I'm going to hit 5 major forbidden research topics, and we're going to see what the reptilian overlords decide to put down at the bottom of this video. So fun little game there. But also, for those of you watching, these are 5 topics, and by no means the top 5 topics or anything like that, but these are 5 topics that I found are definitely forbidden research topics, that it's hard to find solid information on some of these subjects, and I think they're all very important subjects. And I could probably do a top 20 forbidden research topics, but I thought I'd start with 5. So first off is just conspiracies in general, criminal conspiracies and corruption. And this, of course, is Substantial Evidence by Bill Hubbard. And this is from a corruption case that happened in Lubbock, Texas, back in the early 90s. And Bill Hubbard was a whistleblower cop that went up against the crooked, corrupt district attorney there in Lubbock, Texas. And unfortunately, this is one of those cases where the guy's name, if I say it in this video, I'll probably get my video taken down. So I don't want to do that. He, strangely enough, in spite of all the evidence that came out against him, is still practicing law, at least last time I checked. But I bring this up. One of the forbidden topics, kind of broadly speaking, is that of conspiracy theories. And I know a lot of you are saying, well, duh, but I think it's important for us to back up and remember that a conspiracy is multiple perpetrators working together to commit a crime. That's it. That's a conspiracy. So a conspiracy theory would be the district attorney coming up with a theory about how these people colluded to create this criminal act. That's a conspiracy theory. So it's important to remember that conspiracies are a real thing, and conspiracy theories essentially are what prosecuting attorneys come up with in order to take people to trial. They have to come up with some kind of theory about how this all came together. So I say all that to demystify the whole idea of conspiracy theory, because conspiracies happen all the time. Multiple perpetrators work together to create criminal acts all the time, and they're prosecuted for it on a regular basis. So it's not some crazy thing, but it's important for us as people researching this stuff to remember that these corruption cases like this are at the core of a lot of much bigger things. So it's important not to neglect kind of the local level of a lot of this corruption, because a lot of these will have loose threads you can pull at to find out a lot of other things. And kind of my main point with this video is to encourage many of you watching this to treat a lot of this material as more than just a curiosity, and do your own research and dig into this and realize there's a lot of these cases. As I get through this stack, there's some of this stuff that has yet to really be explored properly and fully, and I think it's up to us to do that. So again, just conspiracies in general are treated as just a taboo topic, and they shouldn't be, because they are a very real thing. Controlling the weather. Now, we're just going to jump right in. Now, this, of course, we're going to go to the other end of the spectrum. And Controlling the Weather, this is a book on a study of law and regulatory processes, controlling the weather, edited by Howard J. Taubenfeld. I think I'm saying his name right. And this is from, I mainly dug this out because this is all the way back from 1970. And just goes to show you that weather modification, controlling the weather, however you want to say it, is a very real thing. And the people discussing this and discussing the legalities of weather modification have been a thing for quite a while, obviously for over 5 decades now. Weather modification is one of those things. Weather control is one of those topics that's so far out that a lot of people just dismiss it outright because it just seems almost this godlike sort of thing. But it is a very real topic that definitely needs to be explored. And this is another one of those topics that it's difficult to find. This has definitely been, like I mentioned the other night in the poisoning the well video, this is definitely one of those topics that has deliberately been poisoned to make a lot of people turn away from the very idea of weather control, weather modification, weather as warfare, because the implications of this are enormous. So anyway, controlling the weather, another forbidden research topic. Then we have the intersection, and I had some books I talked about this the other night on, is the intersection of alien abductions, mind control, and UFOs. And it's one of those funny things. Researching UFOs, fine, you could do that all day long. Talk about aliens abducting people, fine, do that, whatever you want, no problem at all. Research secret aircraft, talk about the SR-71, the stealth technology, whatever, fine. But when you bring all that together and you strip away some of the propaganda in front of it, and you say, gee, the more I look at this, I'm starting to think less and less that this is aliens, and this looks more like a massive psychological operation. That's where you get in trouble. That is the forbidden part. So the forbidden part is connecting the dots and realizing that, wait, so whenever cattle are mutilated, a lot of people are seeing helicopters. Wait a second, so people were seeing these silent helicopters all the way back in the mid 70s? That's nuts. So, and one of as an aside here, this is Dulce Base by Greg Valdez, son of Gabe Valdez, the late Gabe Valdez, pictured there on the cover. First book that kind of opened my eyes to some of this was Enter the Valley by Christopher O'Brien, which is all about the San Luis Valley and the UFOs therein and all the weird stuff. And he had a lot of stuff in his books talking about cattle mutilation, UFOs, and that sort of thing. And he was one of the first ones that mentioned, just casually as he was describing some of this stuff, the prevalence of helicopters adjacent to all this cattle mutilation activity. And that was the first I'd ever heard of that. And I'd always seen that dismissed as wait, helicopters, cattle mutilation, satanic cults wouldn't have the budget to do that. But when you start looking into that, again, you strip back the propaganda on the whole UFO phenomenon and you start seeing some very real world corruption involving high technology. And you start getting into things like exotic weapons testing, sampling of the food supply, the beef cattle, to see if there's contamination of things like mad cow and other things that might be winding up or might be purposely introduced into the food supply. So all of that is important. And cattle mutilation is definitely one of those topics that it's really funny. If you research that topic as aliens, you can do that all day long. But as soon as you start seriously investigating the topic of cattle mutilations from the standpoint of Greg Valdez here, you will find yourself in some serious trouble. And there's actually quite a few investigators who have met very strange ends as a result of their involvement in the cattle mutilation phenomenon. And again, these weren't the people pursuing the aliens doing it. These are the people saying, hey, wait a second, this looks like biological warfare experiments. So, and this is a topic I definitely want to do a whole video just more on cattle mutilation. I think that is a really, really important topic. And this is definitely one, there are not many books that really explore cattle mutilation, UFOs, mind control, all that sort of thing from that angle of a psychological operation. A lot of this is just assumed it's just what it is. It's what it appears to be. It's aliens coming and visiting us. And for the record, before I take any heat on this, I am an alien agnostic. Until I see something quantifiable that is yes, that's an alien, I have no reason to believe that, especially when there is so much military intrigue and high technology involved that we can prove. We have to strip away all that first before we can say, okay, we've weeded out, we've eliminated all the possibility of covert operations, and now we're left with aliens. So it'd take a lot to first eliminate all of the trickery. So moving right along, we have the connection of serial killers to the occult and occult crime in general. And this is Hand of Death. And Hand of Death is a kind of an obscure book by Max Call that's all about Henry Lee Lucas, and his story of how he wound up in what he claimed was a cult called the Hand of Death, where he gets the name for the book, and all the stuff that happened to him. This is really more of the funny thing about this book is it's not, at the time when this book came out, and I think like 85, this was not near as explosive as it is now, because everybody just knew, okay, Henry Lee Lucas just got arrested and they connected him to all these murders. So no shock there. And this was really more about Henry Lee Lucas and his conversion to Christianity in jail and this nun that was working with him and all that. But in the course of talking to this nun and divulging all of this information to Max Call, a lot of information came out that connected Henry Lee Lucas to some pretty significant occult group that was doing a lot of professional hits, snuff films, that sort of thing. So crazy stuff there. But again, that connection of occult criminal activity and serial killers and all, that's another one of those. You can look into serial killers all day long as you look at them as a lone nut. As long as you see them as just a lone perpetrator doing his thing out there, and you're fine. But as soon as you start looking at multiple perpetrator cases and realizing that a lot of these people were working together with accomplices, multiple accomplices, and a lot of times doing what they were doing at the behest of someone else, in some cases professional hits and things like that, that's where you get really discouraged from pursuing that line of research. So again, that intersection of occult activity and criminal activity, and more specifically serial killers, and Programmed to Kill by Dave McGowan is an excellent on that. But I'll link to some of that on the end screen. But again, I mainly got out this one because this is very specific to Henry Lee Lucas and his being allegedly trained in something that he referred to as the Hand of Death. And the interesting thing is, after a lot of really strange things happened to Henry Lee Lucas in jail, then he suddenly retracted all that, and even the state of Texas went back and, oh, no, he was just making all this up. And one of the crazier things about it, without lingering too much on this, so this book was printed in 85, if memory serves me right. This is it came out pretty soon, from 1985, and I don't think this has ever been reprinted. This is a hard one, or last time I checked, this is a hard one to get. So this is printed in 1985, and he tells Max Call about a ranch down just over the border where they were doing snuff films, and there was a lot of weird occult activity, and they were kidnapping people and taking them across the border into and then handing them off to this occult group, and basically just like roofing people and taking them down, taking kids, taking teenagers, whoever, taking them down with stolen cars and passing this off to this group down in Mexico. The interesting thing about that is, if he was all just making all this stuff up, in 1989, if you are a resident of Texas, you probably remember this case, the Mark Kilroy case. Mark Kilroy was a college student who I think he was going to Stephen F. Austin, and he was abducted on spring break and never showed up again. And finally, there was like a drug raid or something on this ranch down in Mexico across the border, where these guys ran a roadblock, and then the Mexican police followed them back. They wound up in the shootout, killed some of them, caught some of them. But they found this ranch, and when they started exploring the ranch, they found Mark Kilroy's body, who had been ritually murdered, and his brain actually taken out of his head and used as part of some kind of stew to give them supernatural powers or whatever. And a lot of really messed up stuff came out, and there was like a mass grave of bodies down there. And that was where Henry Lee Lucas had said stuff was going on, and then lo and behold, 4 years after this book, we get the Mark Kilroy case. And that's another one of those occult crime cases that really gets ignored when people talk about that sort of thing. And if you're my age or around my age, if you're in your 40s or 50s, you might remember the Mark Kilroy case because it was messed up. That was a weird, crazy case. Now, last but not least is, of course, the very, probably the most sobering topic of this whole video is the area of multiple perpetrator child abuse cases. And I have to be very careful with my language here so that this video can stay up. Rings involving multiple perpetrators, the use of children for blackmail operations and that sort of thing, all these things are exceedingly difficult to research and I think are incredibly important to research. And it's only really been in recent history, in my lifetime, that it was made illegal in most Western countries to possess this material. Prior to the mid-70s or so, and I can't remember all my dates on this, but I think it was mid-70s to late 70s is when they finally started passing laws making it illegal to possess this material right here, just in case you can't see that. I'll hold that up. But that material described on that title of that book. Rings that do this sort of thing, as Tim Tate points out in this book, this is one that I think you can find on Amazon. This is some incredibly dark reading. And after he researched this book, he ran into he was working with several, he's a British author, and he was working with several people in, think like Interpol and Customs. And they said, well, what you really need to look into is Satanism, because Satanism and this go hand in hand. And they tipped him off about some stuff he should look into, and he did, and he wrote Children for the Devil. So, but this is a very dark read about that. And one of the things I mainly thought about with this is something that another kind of an offshoot of that is, again, a kind of a forbidden research topic is sadism as it relates to this and just evil in general. We really like to think, most of us in especially Western society, we like to think of evil as this like cartoon sort of thing that doesn't really truly exist. We like to think of people having disorders and things that might be like a chemical imbalance in their brain, but we don't like to think of there actually being like the evil behind this sort of thing. We like to think maybe somebody just has a predilection towards doing something with a kid. And I'm sure there's some of that too, but what is described in here is a whole different animal. And I'm going to read, I read this before, and this is a tough pill to swallow, but this is a tough thing to even hear. But I think for people who live in that bubble and don't believe that evil exists, I think this will snap you out of it really quick, because a lot of times when people are thinking about this kind of activity and this kind of stuff, we think of the lonely weirdo that's doing stuff, and we don't think about someone that is getting off on the fact that they're getting away with something in front of other people. So a good example of that, in the member section, I did a video that's a little too spicy to put out for the public, but about there was a guy who I found out about later that when I was working in a therapeutic environment, I found out later there was a guy who had been doing stuff with kids, not right in front of me and not where I could have seen it, but it was happening in my sphere of influence where I should have known. And the people I worked with I mean, not in a criminally liable way. I need to make that clear. Not, I mean, I like to have it never happened where I would have been able to stop it. Let me put that out there. That's an important detail. But when I found out years later that this had been happening, it was heartbreaking because I knew I'd been working with these kids, and then knowing that that was literally happening on my watch, like happening in a way that I still to this day feel like I should have known. The thing I realized in reading some of this kind of stuff is you realize that the people who do this, that's what they get off on. Yes, they're getting off on the satisfaction of doing the thing, the act. That's part of it. But a bigger part of it is the fact that they're getting away with something, that they're doing something, and then they're gaslighting you into thinking that they're not doing the very thing that they're doing. And it's the anguish, it's the pain, it's all the stuff that they're doing. That's what they get off on. And he has an excerpt, Tim Tate does here, of an author that was writing a lot of stuff for this kind of material. And here's what this guy says. And if you, trigger warning, and I mean that, I mean serious trigger warning, because this is, when you hear this, you won't be able to unhear it. And it's not so much graphic as much as morally graphic and the implications of this. So it says, Pure was what this guy was writing, was this magazine. Pure itself was a distinctly makeshift magazine, but its contents lived up to Soto's advertising copy. Illustrating the various articles and essays within issue 3 are photographs showing small female people having stuff done to them. The pictures were culled by Soto's in the magazine was, I don't even want to read some of the titles here, but it was the text accompanying the photographs that shocked detectives from Chicago Police Department, particularly Soto's obsession with the Moores murders. Okay, so this is him talking about these murders that occurred in the UK. Little kidlings are precious to parents. Their lives become meaningful and important because of the little bundle of love that bounces on their knees. Their grief and sense of loss is immense when their tiny God's gifts are destroyed. Their entire lives crumble and break. An excruciating pain that becomes omnipotent as the child's memory is rendered burdensome due to the brutality and masterful eloquence of the dominant. Every time Leslie Ann Downey's mommy remembers her little dead child, her twinkling images are quickly torn to bits by Ian Brady's ingenious tortures. She hears the screams and tastes the tears that Brady wrested from her little girl's body. She sees her daughter's 10-year-old body. Anyway, and I can't even finish this. Some of this is more graphic. But I'll just wrap it up with his end of this paragraph. It's a permanent pain that lives on, growing like a cancer with her darling daughter's memory. And that's how the sadists of the world think of this stuff. It's not the anguish is part of that's part of the point of the whole thing. And again, that's why there's such an effort to sanitize historical figures like the Marquis de Sade and things like that, where we get things like sadism from, and say that these guys were just misunderstood geniuses. But when you actually read their writing and actually read what they're getting off on, these are not people we would want anyone to emulate. So. Anyway, so I know I ended on a very dark note there, but that kind of sadism, that kind of crime involving children of the photographic type is another one of those areas that you really are discouraged from poking around a lot. And a good example of that, and this is unfortunately I can't even say the name of the the case, or if you want to call it a case, but past offense, and I'm sure someone will go down below in the comment section and explain what past offense is, but I can't even say the name of the case or the conspiracy or whatever, because just saying that will get this video taken down. But past offense is a good example of that, of sadists in Washington, D.C. and some of their behavior. So anyway, important stuff. Again, my main reason for this video is I think some of these topics of research, especially where overall just broadly criminal conspiracies, I think things like this are really important to remember. These are more than a curiosity. We're dealing with people's lives, and sometimes it could be people like us can be the ones that wind up finding additional information that helps other people solve some of this. So don't underestimate your potential influence on the world of this kind of stuff. But just know that especially when you're getting into stuff like this, you will run into some resistance really fast. And it's amazing in some of these topics, especially this one, how many the people who will come out of the woodwork to discourage you from this. And I don't mean discouraging you from it because because of the nature of, some of the stuff is not exactly like good dinner party conversation. I'm talking about the people who will try to tell you that it's just not a thing worth even looking at. Some of those people, you definitely want to check their browser history. There's definitely some people who I've talked to over the years that I found out later were people I should have been more wary of. So anyway, that is 5 potential topics of research for you. And again, I'm kind of curious what will happen with this video, if I will get a warning, one of those little Wikipedia pages down there. I'm kind of curious because I threw a lot at the computer machine here. So we'll see what the overlords decide to put down below. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll link some of those that I mentioned in the on the end screen. And then, of course, you can always search any of these books. I think the only one in this stack that I have not reviewed is Controlling the Weather. This is the only one. This is more a series of articles and pretty dry reading about the legalities of controlling the weather than a real, book like some of the other stuff I cover. But anyway, enough about that. Thanks for watching as always, and big thanks to the members for supporting the channel. I really appreciate the new members that have come on board, and I'll be posting more content soon enough. But again, thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting the channel.